So just recently I decided to buy a new camp stove. I've been relying on my old butane stove for the last year and a half or so, ever since I started living in my car. It's been a really good stove, but I've had 3 problems with it. So first off, it doesn't really work below 40 degrees. And most of the time that's not a huge issue, especially now that I have the heater in the bus. Most of the time though, I do a lot of my cooking outside because it's just easier. And so for, half the year, you just can't use it around here. The second problem is it doesn't have a windshield of any sort. So if it's a windy day, kind of like it is today, it'll blow the flame out. And the third and most serious problem that I've had with it is finding fuel. Finding the butane fuel canisters that go into the camp stove has been a challenge. For the entire winter, most of the fall and spring, I haven't been able to even find those fuel canisters. I could order them online, but I don't have anywhere that will accept them when I'm shipping them. And so that's been a huge problem. And then when they did reappear on local store shelves, like they did earlier this spring, they were super expensive. They were something like $3, $4. I saw one place that had even closer to $5 per canister, and the canisters don't really last that long. So I needed to do something different, and I had a Coleman propane stove that came with the bus, but it had a lot of serious leaks, and it wasn't safe to use. So I was looking online to see if I could find something different, and I did find something which I think is perfect for my situation. So this is the Hike Crew propane stove, and it comes with an oven underneath. As you can see, it comes in this really handy carrying case. Now, because I don't actually do a lot of cooking in the bus, and it's probably not 100% safe to do cooking in the bus without an actually indoor rated unit and lots of ventilation, I chose this outdoor unit because it was one of the least expensive stoves with an oven that you could get that works outside. So Coleman does sell a folding oven that comes with their camping stove, and that would definitely be more space efficient. But I have the room in my bus to actually store this, so I figured, why not go for a full oven? So the carrying case has some really nice handles so that you can move it around. It does say Hike Crew on the top, but I wouldn't recommend taking this hiking unless you're really in for a punishing hike. I would say it's not particularly lightweight, and it's only semi-portable, but for what I do, either I'll be using a picnic table like this to cook on, or I have my own table that it's in the bus, which you've probably never seen, but I can also use that to cook on as well. So for me, this setup is actually really perfect. So as you can see, it's fairly large actually, but once it's on the picnic table, the stove top here is at the right height. I really like this bright red too. This top surface here is very similar to what you would find on a Coleman stove. These burners do look a little bit different. The build quality is pretty similar to the Coleman stove. It's kind of flimsy sheet metal, but it does the job. Down here you have really solid controls. You can tell this is just operating a needle valve, and it has a separate igniter right here. So there's 2 burners and an oven. So the oven, you can see, has a thermometer on the outside. So as you can see, this doesn't have any sort of thermostat controls. Instead, what you do is you have this knob here, which you turn to ignite like that, and then you set it to whatever setting you want to bring the temperature here up to whatever temperature you need. So it's not going to be a device that you leave and just kind of ignore. Really, you shouldn't be leaving your stoves and ovens unattended when you're camping anyways, so this really isn't that big of a deal to me. As you can see, the hose and regulator are stored inside the oven. The regulator stock hooks up just to a 20-pound propane tank or something with a similar fitting on it. Because I don't really want to deal with that much propane in the bus, it really restricts where you can go, and it's just a hassle to hang on to. I'm using 1-pound propane bottles that look like that. And so I have this adapter that I just picked up off Amazon that will connect the propane bottle to this regulator. One really important thing to mention about that adapter is you have to hook it up onto the hose first, because it is just a pass-through, it's just an adapter. If you hook it up to the bottle first, it'll just spray propane everywhere, so don't do that. Always hook it up to the regulator first. So you can see the hose just attaches to the back of the stove right there, and then the propane bottle should just screw on like this. So I haven't actually tried this out yet, so we'll see if this fires up. So it's a windy day here today at the campground, and you can see the flame's lit. It seems to be doing just fine, and it's heating up this pot of water so I can clean that pan. The one thing I don't really know yet is how long that 1 pound propane bottle is going to last. I suspect it will last a while, although I also suspect that the oven will use a fair amount of fuel, but we'll find out and see. So I'll let you know in future videos if there's going to be any problems with the amount of propane that I have, but I suspect the 1 pound propane bottle will be just fine for my purposes. So I tried making supper with the oven. I didn't really have time to actually make something, so I picked up some vegan enchiladas that happened to be at Trader Joe's. It took me a few tries to figure out how to get the oven to light, but once I figured out the strategy, it lights every time. It's just I had to figure out how to do it, and it seems to work really well. The outside of the oven actually doesn't get hot at all, which is great, and it got up to temperature relatively quickly. So I cooked my food like a normal oven and shut it off and checked to see if it used a ton of propane or something, like if the propane bottle was completely empty, and it really wasn't empty. There still feels like there's tons of propane in the cylinder. So I would say this stove is definitely a success. I'm really excited that I have this, and it's going to be a great addition to my bus. I noticed on the outside it actually has instructions on how to use it indoors. I may use it indoors, but it would definitely be with the windows open because it does put out a lot of water like any propane burning device. And I also don't want to get carbon monoxide poisoning even with my carbon monoxide detector. It's better just to generally keep the windows open when I'm using anything combustible inside the van. But I'm really happy with the way it performs. We'll see how it holds up, but it looks pretty sturdy. I don't think there's going to be too many problems with it. The propane seems to be holding up really well, so hopefully that'll last a long time. I won't have to be buying tons of cylinders. And even if I do, I could always switch to a 20-pound propane tank if I decide I want to find somewhere to store that 20-pound propane tank. And it does take up a lot of room, but I think it's going to be worth it having it on the bus. It's just so much better quality of life having a working proper stove and oven combination, and one that uses fuel that's readily available. I can find those 1 pound propane tanks just about everywhere. So I'm really excited to have this stove working. Oh, and as far as the vegan enchiladas go, you know, they're fine.